Hello, I'm Matt and welcome to Badger Workshop. So with the outside about done, it's time to start on the interior. I'm going to start with getting the electrics in, and I'm going to run 2 ring circuits for sockets. I'm not installing any lights because the ceiling's low, so I'm just going to use lamps, and I always have photographic lamps on for when I'm filming. So I'm just going to make sure I've got plenty of sockets, and I'm going to go for 6 double sockets, so 12 plugs all along the back wall. So the cable comes out from the consumer unit, goes to each socket, gets to the end of the run, and then loops back round to the consumer unit. With all the cables run, I can then get the insulation in. So what I'm using is some Rockwool 50mm sound insulation. I used the 50mm Kingspan insulation in the floor, and I wanted that because it's more waterproof and when taped up forms a vapour barrier, but for the walls and the ceilings, being acoustically insulated was more important. I've used this stuff before and it really cuts down on the noise. 100mm would have been better, and that's what I thought about using originally. The trouble is, the thicker it is, the more it eats into the usable space in the workshop, and also it adds to the cost. Also, this stuff is incredibly easy to work with. Just cut it with a sharp knife, and then for the walls I just go for a friction fit. The ceiling is a bit trickier, so I cut them over size, and then I've got enough room both sides to really wedge it in, and that holds it in place. If it needs a bit more help, a staple gun's good. So you could line the walls with anything you wanted really. Originally I quite liked the idea of saving up lots of pallet slats and going for a log cabin type look. But then I decided the most important thing is keeping the sound down. Now, after listening to some experts on sound, density is quite important. So, even though MDF is medium density fibreboard, it is the most dense of all the kind of sheet materials available, therefore really good at insulating for sound. So what I'm using is 18mm MDF, so it's pretty thick to start with. So not only is it going to have good acoustic properties, but if I want to hang anything on the wall, I can just screw straight into it. So I thought I'd start with the hardest bit, and that's the end walls because they have the curve on them. As you saw, I kept all my offcuts from where I cut the curve earlier so I could use them as a template. I screwed a little batten on the wall so I've got something to rest this on as I lift it up. My dad had gone home again at this point, so I could really get on without anyone trying to help. I used my level and a pencil to work out where the centre of all the studs were, and then I can get some screws in to hold it all in place. When I got the curved bits all done, the rest of the panels were pretty easy to get into place. The back wall was nice and simple because it just needed 5 panels or sheets cutting down to the same length. But what I'm going to have to do is install 6 sockets on this wall. I bought some MK back boxes and knocked up this quick template on the bandsaw for them. This is slightly larger than the back box itself because I'm going to use a bushing in the router to cut out this hole. All I do is screw this template into position for all 6 sockets on the back of the board so the screws won't show up later, or the screw holes. Then I've got a spiral upcut bit in the router which I run round. The template can then come off and I've got a perfect fitting hole ready for my back box. So before I get the panel fitted in place, I get the box put in and then the cables pulled into it. Most back boxes are designed to work with plasterboard, and this MDF is thicker. So these ones are a slightly different design. They've got kind of a board around them with a screw hole in each corner. The MDF can then get screwed in place, and I just work around the rest of the workshop doing that. The curved ceiling is a little more complicated. Obviously I'm not going to be able to bend some 18mm MDF. So I've got this thin strip of wood which I can bend to the curve of the roof. I can then cut it down to the exact length and use it as a story stick. I use it to mark out some 6mm MDF, which I then get clamped together and I cut it all down at the same time. Now this was probably the hardest part of the whole build, it made getting those walls up on my own look simple. I could get one end up and get it hooked over the MDF walls, and then I can get some screws into the rafters. I continued along the roof and only got halfway, and then I stopped to get on with the next job, which was getting the stove installed. So I bought this gasket, which has got this high temperature silicone on it, and these different rings on it you cut down to different pipe widths. The metal on the side is bendable, so you can shape it to the ridges of the roof. So here I've cut away the breathable membrane and taped it all up around the outside. I've then drawn out a hole where the stovepipe needs to go, and I'm just drilling some holes to help get the jigsaw in. I've got a metal cutting blade in the jigsaw, which needs to be quite long to deal with the peaks and the troughs of the roof. With the peaks and the troughs and the fact that the roof is curved, trying to do this cut is really quite tricky. Also, I hadn't particularly thought where I wanted the stove to go before I started, so this is where one of the overlaps of the roof is, and if I'd planned it better, I'd have tried to get it so the pipe just went through a single layer of the sheet. Anyway, I got it cut out in the end, and it's amazing how much light it let in. Maybe I should have a hole in the roof all the time. So my jigsaw work left quite a rough edge, so I got the angle grinder with a flap disc to give it all a clean up. I installed this roof sheet, and this is just going to be temporary while I go up on the roof and trace out the hole. For me, this was just easier than trying to work out the exact position. I thought I'd just install the sheet, draw around the hole, and then I can take the sheet back down onto the trestle and cut it out with the jigsaw. So I can now get all the stove components put together. This is some 5-inch twin wall pipe, and then I install a reducer that goes from 5-inch twin wall to 5-inch single wall pipe. These two bits just lock together with a locking ring. This reducer piece then goes into the 5-inch single wall pipe. But first I run some fire cement round so I get a nice tight, airtight seal. The end of the 5-inch single wall then goes into the top of the stove, so again I put some fire cement round and then it can be put in place. I then go round putting some more fire cement in to make a nice tight seal. To make the installation easier, I ordered this little kit to come with this. So I've got this little tube of silicone which can cope with high temperatures, and there's some self-tapping screws as well. So I go up to where the twin wall is, and I've got a wet sponge. I'm just wetting down the outside, and that will make the silicone a bit easier to slip over. It can then just be pulled over the top and down to the roof, and then I kind of work trying to get the base to contour to the roof nicely. I then fetch that little tube of silicone, and you want to run a bead of silicone around the edge of the whole thing. It might only look a little tube, but there's more than enough in there, and I'll make sure I use every last bit of it. To hold this all tight and really drive it in, you use the self-tapping screws into the metal surround of that flange. This was a little tricky to do from the ladder because you want to get some weight behind the drill to really push down on them. Right, here's a top tip for you. If you're climbing a ladder with too much to take and you've got a locking ring to take up, just balance it on the top of your head. So the last thing to go in place is the witch's hat. Great name, I know. And that just stops any rain going down the chimney, or flue. So that just goes in place with a locking ring and gets tightened down. And that is the stove installed. I was keen to get it lit to play with my new toy, but you do have to do this. To get the fire cement to cure, you need to light it and gradually increase the temperatures over 4 hours. but it was nice to have it lit, and it drew really well. So with the stove installed, I went around and installed the rest of the insulation and all the MDF. On the joints of the roof sheets, I went and installed some thin strips of wood just to cover them up, and they look like quite nice ridges along the roof. I could then go round and prime all the surfaces. I then got a top coat of like an off-white colour on the roof and the wall with the doors and the windows, and then the long back wall and the two end walls got this kind of off-grey blue colour called denim drift. And that is really it all finished. So next time I'll do a tour and show you all around. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe for more videos.